Picture this. You are on a small wooden boat, and it is just disappearing into the absolute inky darkness on the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah, and I mean, you aren't a tourist on a sightseeing cruise. You are a local, calloused, lifelong fisherman.
Exactly. You know this water, you know its moods, right? And tonight, the mood is lethal.
Completely lethal.
The wind has risen out of nowhere. It's howling and shrieking through the primitive rigging above your head. The waves are building fast, not just rocking the boat, but breaking violently over the low wooden sides.
And the water is just pooling around your ankles.
Right. Then your shins, then your knees.
Yeah.
The chaotic roaring of the wind and the desperate screaming voices of your crew are just deafening.
It's pure chaos.
It is. You are looking at the water, looking at the black sky, and realizing with absolute certainty that your experience cannot save you. You are going down.
You're gonna die.
Yeah, and amidst all of this terrifying, waterlogged chaos, you look to the back of the boat and, well, Jesus is asleep.
He is completely dead to the world. He's resting on a cushion as the boat literally fills with water.
It's so jarring.
It really is. That profoundly jarring contrast, mortal panic colliding with absolute undisturbed peace. That's our starting point today.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to take a stack of really fascinating sources, extract the most crucial insights, and help you understand a very familiar story in a completely new way.
Yeah, because we are looking at one of the most dramatic moments in biblical history, which is the calming of the storm on the Sea of Galilee.
And our primary lens for this exploration is actually a remarkable piece of media history. We are analyzing a mid-20th century audio dramatization of this event.
Right, from the legendary religious radio program, the Ave Maria Hour.
Yes, and we are supplementing that vintage radio broadcast with a really robust stack of historical and theological research.
We've got the original gospel accounts from Matthew, Mark, and Luke to compare the nuances of the text.
Which is super important.
Definitely. And we are pulling in insights from Old Testament theology, too, specifically, the book of Jonah and the Psalms.
Plus, we'll consult the Catechism of the Catholic Church and the writings of early church fathers, guys like St. Jerome and St. John Chrysostom.
Oh, and we even have some incredible modern archaeological data concerning a first-century fishing boat that was pulled right from the mud of the Sea of Galilee.
I love that part. So we are taking all of these different threads, the media history, the ancient boat construction, geography, and deep theology, and we're weaving them together to answer one central burning question.
It is the exact question the terrified disciples ask at the very end of this narrative.
Right. Once the storm is gone, they look at each other and ask, "Who then is this that even wind and sea obey him?"
And that question is the anchor for our entire discussion today. We are deliberately avoiding the temptation to reduce this profound historical event to a generic inspirational metaphor.
Oh, for sure. You hear it all the time.
Right. It is incredibly common to hear this story summarized as the comforting reminder that the divine will help you get through the metaphorical storms of your life.
Yeah, like just hold on. God will calm your storm.
Exactly. And while that might be a comforting thought, treating this text merely as a motivational poster really misses the sheer terror and the monumental theological weight of what actually happened on that water.
It totally dilutes it. This is an exploration of identity. It is about the shocking revelation of who is actually sleeping in their boat.
Yes. And to really grasp the weight of that revelation, we need to step into the theater of the mind.
Which is precisely what the Ave Maria Hour did so effectively for millions of listeners. If we wind the clock back, this radio program was a cultural juggernaut.
It really was. It aired from 1935 all the way through 1969.
Think about that era. We are talking about an era before television completely dominated the living room. Families would gather around these large wooden console radios in the evening.
And the Franciscan Friars of the Atonement, who operated out of Greenmore and New York City, they produced this show. They broadcast it on over 350 stations globally.
Including the Armed Forces Radio Service, right?
Yep, exactly. And they weren't just, reading Bible verses into a microphone. They were producing high-quality, professional, award-winning audio dramas.
The production values were insane for the time. They were so well regarded that they won a Golden Bell Award in 1959.
And that was presented on live television by Ed Sullivan.
Ed Sullivan, that's huge.
It is. They utilized professional voice actors, intricate musical scoring, and cutting-edge sound design. Today, the Friars are actually meticulously restoring a library of over 2,500 of these recordings.
From the original 12-inch and 16-inch vinyl transcription discs. It's such cool preservation work.
It really is.
And listening to their dramatization of the storm at sea, you immediately realize why this particular gospel narrative is a masterpiece of audio storytelling.
Because visual mediums like film or television, they do all the heavy lifting for the audience.
Right. A director shows you the CGI waves crashing, the lightning strikes, the rain lashing against the actors' faces. You become this passive observer of the storm.
But audio drama forces you into active participation.
Yes. When you only have sound, the roaring wind, the creaking of strained wood, the frantic overlapping shouting of panicked men, your brain has to construct the imagery.
You have to build the darkness in your own mind. You have to imagine the freezing water hitting your skin.
And the human imagination will always conjure something far more terrifying than what can be shown on a screen, right? Because it tailors the fear directly to you, the individual listener.
Absolutely. And if we examine the pacing of the specific radio transcript for this episode, the producers masterfully manipulate that auditory tension.
They really do. The broadcast doesn't start with chaos.
No, it begins in this atmosphere of deep tranquility. Jesus is standing by the shore, teaching massive crowds.
The audio establishes his authority through his words. We hear him delivering familiar parables, the mustard seed, the weeds, and the wheat.
His tone is calm, patient, and instructional. The listener feels the warmth of a teacher imparting wisdom.
But then the audio shifts to capture the sheer exhaustion of the situation. The crush of the crowds is overwhelming.
Yeah, the sensory overload of thousands of people pressing in for healing, for answers, for miracles, it takes a massive physical toll.
So to escape this crushing pressure, Jesus and his inner circle board a small fishing boat. And Simon sets their navigational heading. He states they are setting a course south by east for the Valley of Gerasa.
And that geographical detail is highly significant.
How so?
Well, by heading south and east from the familiar Jewish strongholds like Capernaum, they are deliberately crossing the lake into the Decapolis.
Okay.
This is a region of Greco-Roman cities. So
Yeah.
in the context of first-century Judaism, they are heading into Gentile territory.
Which would have been culturally and religiously foreign land.
Exactly. It sets a subtle baseline of tension even before the weather turns.
Oh, that's fascinating. And then the transition from the peaceful shore to the chaotic water is abrupt, violent, and entirely auditory.
The quiet exhaustion of a long day of teaching is just shattered by the deafening roar of a maritime disaster.
We hear the frantic voices of the crew. Simon is screaming over the tempest that the wind is too strong. They can't bring the boat around into the wind to stabilize it.
They are taking on water incredibly fast. The listener is plunged into this claustrophobic soundscape of drowning men.
And the climax of the audio drama relies entirely on contrast. The tempest reaches a crescendo of absolute terrifying noise, and then that wall of sound is pierced by a single calm voice.
Jesus simply says, "Peace, be still."
Instantly, the roaring wind and crashing waves vanish. The audio cuts to an overwhelming, heavy, suffocating silence.
And honestly, the absence of sound in that moment is the most dramatic element of the entire broadcast. It feels heavier than the storm itself.
It really does. But to truly appreciate why that sudden silence left the disciples paralyzed with a new kind of fear, we have to transition from the imagined storm of the radio play to the historical and geographical reality of the Sea of Galilee.
We need to ground this story in the physical dirt, or rather, the physical water of the ancient Near East.
Right. So tell us about the Sea of Galilee, because it's a very specific topographical anomaly, isn't it?
It is. For starters, it is actually a large freshwater lake, not a saltwater sea. And it sits roughly 700 feet below sea level in the Great Rift Valley.
700 feet below.
Yeah, it's deep down there. And it is completely surrounded by steep hills and mountains, particularly the Golan Heights to the east and Mount Hermon further north.
So think of the geography like a massive natural wind tunnel. The climate down at the lake level is warm, almost subtropical.
But you have freezing dense air sitting up on those high mountain peaks.
And without warning, that cold air can sweep down through the wadis, the deep ravines cutting through the hills, and funnel directly onto the surface of the lake.
Exactly. When that dense, freezing air collides violently with the warm, moist air sitting over the water, it creates an explosive atmospheric reaction.
The resulting squalls are incredibly violent, and they materialize with almost zero advance warning. The water goes from glass to lethal chaos in minutes.
And the fishermen navigating those waters knew this topographical reality intimately. They had likely survived sudden storms before.
Right. These were seasoned veterans.
So to understand why these guys were so utterly convinced they were going to die in this particular storm, we have to look closely at the physical parameters of the boats they relied on.
Which we actually know about now.
Yes. For centuries, we only had educated guesses about first-century Galilean naval architecture, but that changed dramatically with a major archaeological breakthrough.
This is such a cool story. In 1986, Israel suffered a severe drought. The water level of the Sea of Galilee dropped significantly, exposing vast stretches of mudflats along the northwest shore that had been submerged for millennia.
And two brothers, Moshe and Yuval Lufan, who happened to be both local fishermen from Kibbutz Genesar and enthusiastic amateur archaeologists, were walking these newly exposed flats.
Just keeping an eye out.
Yeah, and they noticed a couple of ancient iron nails sticking out of the mud attached to the faint outline of rotting wood.
Where it stumbled upon the remarkably preserved remains of a first-century fishing boat. The thick, oxygen-deprived mud of the lake bed had essentially sealed the wood, preventing it from completely decaying for 2,000 years.
Which is mind-blowing. And removing it was an engineering marvel in itself. If the waterlogged wood was exposed to the dry air, it would instantly turn to dust.
So what did they do?
Archaeologists had to excavate the mud around it, encase the entire fragile hull in polyurethane foam, similar to modern insulation, and carefully float the entire foam block down the lake to a conservation facility.
Wow.
There, the water in the wood cells was slowly replaced with synthetic wax over a period of 12 years.
12 years. It is an absolute miracle of archaeology.
Yeah.
They call it the Jesus boat, or the ancient Galilee boat. Now, obviously, we aren't saying this is the exact boat Peter and Jesus were in.
No, of course not.
But it dates precisely to the 1st century, and it matches the physical descriptions in the gospel texts perfectly. Looking at the dimensions of this vessel provides incredible context for the storm narrative.
The boat is remarkably small for navigating open water. It measures roughly 27 feet long and 7.5 feet wide, with a maximum preserved height of just over 4 feet.
So to put that in perspective, imagine trying to cram 13 grown men, 12 disciples, and Jesus, along with their fishing nets, oars, and supplies, into a space smaller than a modern shipping container.
And with sides that only come up to your waist.
Yes. There is almost zero freeboard, meaning the distance between the waterline and the top of the boat is terrifyingly small.
And the structural design of the hull is even more telling. It features a shallow draft with a completely flat bottom.
Which is great for fishing.
Exactly. From a functional standpoint, a flat bottom is ideal for a fishing crew operating on a lake. It allows the boat to slide right up onto the shallow, muddy shores to offload a catch or repair nets without running aground.
But a flat bottom is a death sentence in a violent storm. Think about the physics of it. A boat with a deep V-shaped hull or a heavy keel is designed to slice into oncoming waves, maintaining its center of gravity. It cuts through the turbulence.
But a flat-bottom boat acts like a wooden leaf. It doesn't cut through the water, it just rides the surface tension.
So if a 6-foot wave hits a flat-bottomed boat broadside, it doesn't slice through it. The wave simply lifts one side of the flat hull, flips the entire center of gravity sideways, and rolls the boat over.
Capsizing is almost inevitable in high seas. Furthermore, the construction methods highlight the fragility of the vessel. It was built using a technique called mortise and tenon joinery.
Explain that a bit.
So instead of using a metal frame, the builders carved small projecting pieces of wood, the tenons, along the edge of a plank, and fitted them into precisely carved slots, the mortises on the adjacent plank, locking them together with wooden pegs.
Oh, I see.
When the wood hit the water, it swelled, creating a watertight seal. It is a brilliant ancient technique, but it relies heavily on the structural integrity of the wood itself.
And that leads to the most fascinating detail of the entire excavation. When botanists analyzed the hull, they discovered it wasn't made of a single sturdy oak tree. The boat was constructed from 10 entirely different types of wood.
10.
Yeah. There was cedar, oak, willow, hawthorn, and several others pieced together.
And the presence of so many different wood types suggests a clear socioeconomic reality. These fishermen were not wealthy merchants with access to pristine shipyards.
Not at all.
Wood was likely scarce or expensive in the region, so this boat was heavily patched, repaired, and cannibalized from scrap timber over many years of hard use.
It's like taking a makeshift raft built out of random scavenged wooden pallets, putting it out onto a massive trampoline while a giant is jumping on it and hoping the ancient duct tape holds.
That is a terrifying image, but very accurate.
It grounds this biblical story in a gritty, sweaty, working-class reality. The disciples aren't sailing in a pristine, impenetrable yacht. They are riding out a hurricane in a fragile, patchwork workhorse that is actively groaning and flexing under the pressure of the waves.
Put yourself in the sandals of Peter, Andrew, James, or John. You know the lake's deadly history. You know a sudden squall can sink a fleet. You know the exact structural limitations of your flat-bottomed scrapwood boat.
You are fighting the tiller, trying to manage the staggered oars, watching the waves crest higher than the sides of the hull.
Your panic is completely rational. You are doing the math, and the math says you are going to drown in the dark.
Which makes the central image of the entire narrative so intensely frustrating and deeply mysterious.
The sleeping savior.
Yes, the geographical reality of the storm is deadly. The physical reality of the boat is incredibly fragile. The crew is caught in a rational screaming panic. And right in the stern, resting his head on a leather sandbag used for ballast, Jesus is sleeping.
The radio dramatization highlights this moment beautifully just before the storm hits. Simon recognizes the physical toll of the ministry, telling Jesus he has prepared a cushion for him in the stern.
And Jesus falls into a sleep so profound that the violent pitching of the deck, the roaring wind, and the freezing water crashing over his body cannot wake him.
This detail forces us to confront the profound humanity of Jesus. Religious discussions often rush past this to get to the flashy divine miracle.
You always want to get to the magic part.
Exactly, but we have to pause here. He is exhausted. The sheer physical and emotional drain of dealing with the crushing needs of the crowds has depleted his human body to its absolute limits.
To understand the theology behind this tension, we could look to the Catechism of the Catholic Church. The Catechism teaches that everything in Christ's earthly life, his words, his deeds, his silences, his sufferings, and yes, his physical exhaustion, is a revelation of the Father.
His humanity acts as a sacrament. In theological terms, a sacrament is a visible sign and instrument of an invisible reality.
Okay, but wait, I'm struggling with the mechanics of this. I understand how his miracles or his teachings act as a sign of divinity. But how does being unconscious in a sinking boat reveal anything divine?
It's a great question.
I mean, if he's the creator of the universe, his divine nature surely knows a hurricane is currently ripping the mast off his boat. Was he just faking this nap to teach them a lesson? Because frankly, pretending to sleep while your closest friends are traumatized and think they are drowning feels highly manipulative.
That is a brilliant tension to pull on, and it is exactly the discomfort that early Christian thinkers wrestled with. St. Jerome and St. John Chrysostom tackled this exact dynamic.
What do they say?
They adamantly argue against the idea that Jesus was simply faking it. They assert that his physical exhaustion was entirely real. His human body was genuinely depleted.
Okay, so the sleep was real.
Yes. However, they explain that his ability to remain asleep amidst the freezing water and violent motion reflects a perfect divine peace.
Ah, I see.
A merely human nervous system would jolt awake in a panic the moment a wave crashed over the stern, right? Jesus' physical body rests deeply because his divine nature holds absolute sovereignty over the elements. The storm cannot disturb him because the storm belongs to him.
So the exhaustion is authentic, born of human frailty, but the unbroken slumber is sustained by divine authority. It is a paradox.
Chrysostom adds a fascinating psychological layer to this, too. He suggests that Jesus' sleep served a critical pedagogical purpose.
Meaning he was teaching them something.
Yes. By remaining asleep while the boat filled with water, Jesus allowed the disciples to experience the absolute crushing limit of their own competence.
Oh, wow. That reframes the whole scene. If Jesus had been awake the entire time, bailing water alongside them, or actively helping tie down the rigging, they might have relied on him as just another capable set of hands.
Right. They might have yelled, "Rabbi, grab a bucket and help us bail."
But his silence, his inactivity, stripped away their self-reliance. As lifelong fishermen, they were used to solving problems on the water. His sleep forced them past the point of their own expertise until they had nothing left but desperate existential terror.
It forced them to cry out, "Lord, save us, we perish." They had to be emptied of their illusion of control to truly recognize the magnitude of the intervention.
And that cry for salvation from a storm at sea carries massive literary and theological weight.
It really does. For a first-century Jewish listener, hearing a story about a man sleeping in a ship during a supernatural storm wouldn't just be an exciting adventure tale.
No, it would sound an immediate blaring alarm bell, echoing back to the Old Testament. The parallels are unavoidable.
The most glaring connection is the Book of Jonah.
This is a classic example of biblical typology. In literary terms, think of typology as historical foreshadowing. An earlier event, a type, establishes a specific pattern that a later event, the antitype, fulfills and elevates.
And the narrative fingerprints of Jonah are all over this gospel account. Let's trace those fingerprints because the structure is almost identical.
Let's do it.
First, both Jonah and Jesus are prophets boarding a boat to cross a body of water.
Right.
Second, both vessels are suddenly struck by a violent, unnatural tempest that threatens to shatter the hull and drown the crew.
Yes, check.
Third, while the seasoned sailors are frantically trying to save the ship, both Jonah and Jesus are found fast asleep deep within the vessel.
Which is the craziest part of both stories.
Exactly. Fourth, both are rudely awakened by terrified shipmates begging for supernatural deliverance. And finally, both narratives conclude with the storm miraculously ceasing, leading the surviving men to experience a profound, fearful awe of divine power.
The overlap is so precise it feels intentional. But the power of typology usually lies in the contrast, not just the comparison, right? So how does Jesus differ from Jonah in this exact scenario?
The contrast is the entire point. Jonah's presence on his ship was the cause of the deadly peril.
Because he was running away.
Yes. The storm was an act of divine judgment because Jonah was actively fleeing God's command to preach to the city of Nineveh. He was fleeing his mission. Jesus' presence on his boat is the cure for the peril.
Oh, love it.
He isn't running from his mission. He is actively moving toward it, crossing into Gentile territory to bring deliverance to the region of Gerasa. Jonah was a rebellious servant. Jesus is the sovereign Lord.
The Old Testament echoes go far deeper than just the Jonah narrative, too. The Jewish understanding of the sea itself is crucial here.
Oh, absolutely.
In ancient Near Eastern cosmology, the sea wasn't just a body of water with fish in it. It was the ultimate symbol of primordial chaos, destruction, and untamable evil.
In various surrounding mythologies, the sea was personified as a chaos monster like Leviathan or Yam that the gods had to literally battle.
But in Jewish scripture, Yahweh doesn't battle the sea. He commands it.
He just speaks to it.
Exactly. He separates the waters in Genesis. He parts the Red Sea in Exodus. The sea is a wild beast that only the Creator can tame.
And we see this theological absolute spelled out explicitly in the Psalms. Psalm 107, verses 23 through 30, reads almost like a script for this gospel event.
What does it say?
The psalmist describes men who go down to the sea in ships, who experience a terrifying storm raised by God. The text says their courage melts away in their calamity, and they are at their wits' end.
That's familiar.
Right. Then they cry out to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivers them. It says, he makes the storm be still, and the waves of the sea are hushed.
Only Yahweh commands the sea. That is a foundational doctrine for anyone raised on the Hebrew Scriptures. So analyze the mechanics of what happens when the disciples wake Jesus. They are terrified. They want help. Maybe they expect him to pray to God for deliverance, much like the pagan sailors begged Jonah to pray to his deity.
But Jesus doesn't fall to his knees and plead with the heavens to intervene.
No, he doesn't mediate the miracle. He simply stands up, addresses the inanimate, chaotic forces of the wind and the waves directly, and says, "Peace, be still."
Or in some more literal translations of the Greek, he essentially tells the sea to be muzzled, as one would speak to an aggressive animal.
By demanding direct obedience from the elements, Jesus is exercising a uniquely divine prerogative. He is bypassing any request of the Father and acting with the authority that Psalm 107 reserves exclusively for the Creator of the universe.
And that action is the catalyst for the true climax of this narrative, because the calming of the storm is not the end of the story.
It's not.
No, the climax is the severe emotional shift that occurs within that small wooden boat in the seconds immediately following the miracle.
Think about human psychology. If you survive a near-death experience, like a horrific car crash or a severe turbulence event on a flight, the moment you realize you are safe, the adrenaline drops.
You could experience overwhelming relief. You might laugh, cry, or hug the person next to you. The terror evaporates.
But that is not what happens to the disciples.
No, their fear doesn't dissipate. It intensifies. But the object of their fear shifts entirely.
Yes, during the squall, they were experiencing the rational, myrtled terror of drowning. They were afraid of the wind and the water.
But after Jesus speaks and the sea turns to glass, their reaction is far more profound and unsettling. The Gospel of Mark describes their state. It says, "And they feared exceedingly and said one to another, 'What manner of man is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him.
They realize they are safe from the water, but they are suddenly trapped in a tiny space with a power they cannot comprehend.
It's a great analogy you made earlier in our notes.
Oh, right. It's as if you were riding in a car with your mild-mannered accountant and suddenly someone tries to run you off the road.
Yeah.
Your accountant calmly rolls down the window, raises his hand, and suspends the attacking car in midair with telekinesis.
You are safe from the crash, but now you are sitting 2 feet away from someone with godlike power.
Exactly. Your entire understanding of reality has just shattered. The danger is gone, but the awe is paralyzing.
And before they can even voice their bewildered question to each other, Jesus turns the mirror back on them. He looks at these dripping, wet, trembling fishermen and asks a probing question of his own. He asks, "Why are you fearful, O ye of little faith?"
That rebuke feels almost harsh in the moment, but the early church fathers found deep meaning in it. St. Augustine has a brilliant commentary on the incredible irony of this scene.
What did Augustine say about it?
He points out the absurdity of the natural order inverted. The mute, unthinking, chaotic elements of nature, the deafening wind and the violent sea, instantly recognize the voice of their creator and immediately submit in absolute silence. But man, who is made in the very image of God, who possesses an immortal soul, reason, and intellect, dares to doubt, panic, and lack faith in the presence of that same creator.
The water obeys perfectly, while the humans panic. It highlights the internal chaos of the human heart compared to the external chaos of the world.
Now, throughout Christian history, this historical event has been frequently viewed through an allegorical lens. Early theologians like St. John Chrysostom saw a profound metaphor within the literal history.
The allegory maps out beautifully, really. The bark, or the small wooden boat, represents the church navigating through the turbulent history of the world.
And the sea represents the unpredictable, often hostile culture and environment of human history.
Right, while the violent winds represent wicked spirits, persecutions, and the inevitable tragedies of life. Within this framework, when Jesus seems to sleep, when God feels silent, absent, or indifferent during our most painful trials, it is not abandonment.
It's a pedagogical silence.
Exactly. It's designed to prove our faith, to strip away our self-reliance, and to draw us into desperate, earnest prayer. We are meant to awaken him with our cries.
And that allegorical reading has provided immense comfort to suffering people for 2 millennia. But we must be careful not to let the metaphor cannibalize the history.
Oh, absolutely. The allegory only has power because the literal event actually happened.
Right. The metaphor rests on the physical reality of the wood, the water, and the vocal cords of the man who commanded the storm. And the literal event hinges entirely on the disciples' desperate, bewildered question, what manner of man is this?
That question is the theological center of gravity for our entire deep dive today. If you look closely at the accounts in Matthew chapter 8, Mark chapter 4, and Luke chapter 8, you will notice minor narrative variations, which is typical of independent eyewitness testimonies.
But all 3 Gospels converge perfectly, almost verbatim, on the singular moment of utter shock.
Because the miracle was never meant to be a simple parlor trick. It wasn't just a demonstration of a useful power, like a superhero showing off a new ability.
No, it was a terrifying, paradigm-shifting revelation of identity. They thought they knew him, they'd eaten meals with him, they'd walked dusty roads with him.
He was the brilliant rabbi.
He was flesh and blood, a man who got so tired he needed to sleep on a leather cushion. But in a fraction of a second, the veil of his ordinary humanity was pulled back.
The one who separated the waters on the second day of creation in Genesis is standing in their patchwork fishing boat.
The sovereign Lord described in Psalm 107 is looking them in the eye, asking why they lacked faith. The realization that they share this tiny, confined space with the creator of the universe is a reality far more immense than the storm they just survived.
It shatters their categories. They went out onto the water as disciples of a gifted teacher, and they arrived on the other shore as witnesses to the divine word made flesh.
As we wrap up this exploration, I want to bring you back to the sensory environment of the boat immediately after the miracle.
The transition in the environment is absolute. The howling wind that was tearing at the rigging has stopped completely.
The violent churning water that was swamping the hull is now perfectly still, reflecting the dark sky like a mirror.
The frantic screaming of the crew is gone. The silence in the damp air is heavy and absolute.
The disciples are standing knee-deep in cold water. But they aren't reaching for buckets. They aren't trying to bail out the boat. They're frozen in place.
They are looking past the calm water, facing something far more unsettling than the prospect of drowning.
They are staring at a man who, just moments ago, was vulnerable and exhausted, who has just spoken to the ancient, untamable forces of nature, as if they were disobedient children.
They look at him and they ask each other a question in hushed, trembling voices, a question that still demands an answer from every person who encounters this story today.
Who then is this, that even wind and sea obey him?
We want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. When we face crises, when we pray for deliverance from the sudden violent squalls in our own lives, we almost always just want the wind to start blowing.
We want the pain to end. We want to return to predictable normalcy.
But consider what it means when the answer to your desperate prayers reveals something completely unexpected.
What happens when the divine presence that rescues you turns out to be more immense, more challenging, and more incomprehensible than the crisis you were praying to be saved from?
What do you do when the calm after the storm demands vastly more from you than the storm itself?
It is a question worth carrying with you. Thank you for joining us today for this deep dive into the Common Room on Chesterton Radio. Stories, ideas, wonder.
Keep exploring, everyone.